Good morning, people. Ohayo gozaimasu. That is good morning in Japanese. If you're watching this and you have already watched the Loom presentation, this is the same information, so you can watch it in either format. In the Loom presentation, you actually get to see pictures, so try that out too. But for those of you who don't have access to the Loom presentation, I'm going to go ahead and go over the same information in this format so that you can have the same information and you can fill out your passport paper on Japan. Now, Japan is an archipelago. That means it's a group of islands. You guys know from when we studied our landforms that an archipelago is just a bunch of islands. In Japan, there are 4, maybe 5 major islands, and the rest, there's like 100 little bitty islands. If you look on the map, you'll be able to see that Japan, it's off the coast of China. So it's in the same area of the world, but it's in the Pacific, and it is just a string of islands. These islands are mostly volcanic. Many of them are dormant volcanoes. That means they haven't erupted in like thousands of years, but they are volcanic mountains. Mount Fuji is one of the most famous. So if you have not seen my presentation, you can Google Mount Fuji and you can see an example of a dormant volcano in Japan. Japan sits on the Ring of Fire. Now, we talked about that also when we talked about landforms and how the Earth has plates on it, land, and when the plates come together, they push up into mountains or down into valleys or one under the other. That's how Japan was created. It's where 2 plates meet, and it was pushed up into mountains. For this reason, Japan has a lot of earthquakes. They do have some active volcanoes, but they deal with a lot of activity because of that. So you can look up earthquakes in Japan and you might find some interesting things. They've had some really strong earthquakes in Japan in the last 20 years. All right, so that is where Japan is located. Here are your fast facts. And hopefully you've gone on Discovery Ed and you've watched your Fast 5 fact video. But the capital is Tokyo. The language is Japanese, go figure. Their currency is the yen. So when they don't spend dollar bills like we do, they spend yen. There's a picture of it if you Google yen, Y-E-N, you'll see pictures of their money, what they use. There are lots of people in Japan, especially in Tokyo, the capital city. In fact, it's the 10th most populous country in the world. That means there's only 9 other countries that have more people than them. And if you look at Japan on the map, you look at how small it is. Itty space. People don't have much space to move around there. They put a huge emphasis on making your family proud and on education. 98% of the people are literate. That means 98 out of 100 people, every 100 people, can read in Japanese. Their government. So after World War II, before World War II, they had an emperor or a king. After World War II, they still have an emperor, but he's mostly symbolic. I mean, he comes out for government, occasions. He looks good on camera and does formal ceremonies. But when it comes to actually making the laws, in 1946, Japan set up a government, a democracy, where they elected their leaders, their parliament, and their prime minister to make the laws for the country. So they have a democracy, kind of like we do. Now then, getting back to history. The Japan is very close to China, so they got a lot of input from early Chinese reading and writing. Japan has been inhabited. That means people have lived there for over 10,000 years. I saw a couple of websites that said over 30,000, and I decided to go with the sources that I knew were reputable, like Britannica Encyclopedia, things like that. At least 10,000. That's a lot of years. The first writings were from a little over 2,000 years ago, and they were based on the Chinese writing. So people from China came over to trade goods and things like that. And while they were there, they taught the Japanese about Chinese writing, and the Japanese took their alphabet and started writing their Japanese words. So the first writing actually came from China. And then the Japanese developed their own alphabet as time went on. Something else that came from China was the religion of Buddhism. Now, we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk to you about their climate. Now, there's a lot of mountains there, but there's also a lot of beaches and milder climates there. So, I encourage you to go look up pictures of Japan, like Japanese gardens, Japanese mountains, Japanese beaches, and you'll get a variety of pictures that will show you about the different landscape. If you looked at my loom presentation, you saw examples of each of these. But you can see where in the lower lands, especially along the coast, there are a lot of lush gardens, a lot of green growing things. The temperature, it's not quite as warm as it is here in southeast Louisiana, but it gets, between freezing in winter up to, the 80s in summer. So it's similar to what we would have here in the United States, a little farther north of here. In the northern part of Japan and up in the mountains, where it is so high, it is cold. It's well below freezing in the winter. And the highs in the summer are maybe 50s, 60s. It doesn't get that warm. So you'll see lots of pictures of Japan with snow-capped mountains and things like that. And just know that it does get that cold there. Now then, religion. Again, I talk about religion not because I want you to believe what they believe, but because I want you to understand how they think. Now, 98% of all Japanese people, okay, that's 98 out of every 100 people, claim to be either Zen Buddhists or they practice Shintoism. Let me explain what those are. Both of them are polytheistic. That means they believe in many gods. And Buddhism came out of Hinduism. See, the long time ago, centuries ago, there was this guy named Buddha. He practiced the Hindu beliefs of doing good and being at peace with the universe and karma. You do good things are done to you. And he did Hinduism so well that when he died, he supposedly reached nirvana, the ultimate level, and he had written a lot about how to live, and people followed his teachings. So they became Buddhists. That's Hinduisms that go a step beyond. So you have the Buddhists who believe in doing good and living at peace, and they have many gods that they have temples to that they try to be at peace with. Shintoism takes some of those beliefs and the idea of living peaceful, living a balanced life, doing good, and it also incorporates worshiping ancestors. See, there's such a high emphasis on the family there that when someone in the family dies, they become kind of like a god. And so they have statues made to them in shrines or temples made for the ancestors of a family. If you think about a Disney movie Mulan, towards the beginning, where the ancestors come to life to help Mulan. Well, that's based in Shintoism, actually, more than Buddhism. So in the Shintoism beliefs, the ancestors, the family members who have died, are so important that they are worshipped and they are enshrined. So that gives you just a little bit of information about Buddhism and Shintoism. Now, the other 2% of people, a little bitty bit, they have some different religious beliefs. Some of them are Christians. Some of them don't believe in gods. So there's a little bit of a variety there, but most people are either Buddhist or Shintoists. All right, so that's a little bit about their religion. Now then, their life. Here are some things to look up on Google. Kimono, Kimono. You will find all kinds of pictures of men and women dressed in kimonos. That's the traditional dress. And then as far as their food goes, they do a lot of sushi, tofu, rice, seaweed. Tofu and seaweed, I can live with them. I can live without them. Rice, I do a lot of rice. When it comes to sushi, you guys know I ate a lot of strange things during the 2 years I lived in Africa. But when it comes to eating anything raw, all I can say is, oh my Lanta. You can have my sushi. I'll take my fried termites. All right. Now then, on to the economy. So at the end of World War II, 1945, the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. They lost in World War II. They were totally devastated. The economy was devastated. The roads were torn up. Their military was defeated. Their houses, their home lives were a mess. So they had to basically start over. They had to start a new government. They had to start rebuilding their roads and their railroad systems and things like that, and their businesses. So starting from about 1950 on, what Japan really focused on and what they've been known for is technology. You look at names like Nokia and Suzuki. These are companies that came from Japan. Toyota, there you go. Nissan. All of these are Japanese companies. They make a lot of cars, motorcycles, trucks. They make high-speed trains. Japan has one of the best high-speed train systems in the world. They also were some of the first people to have cell phones and make cell phones. And when it comes to robotics, there are a lot of interesting videos out there about artificial intelligence, AI, and how Japan is leading the world in using artificial intelligence or robots when it comes to doing all kinds of simple jobs, like being a receptionist at a hotel and things like that. So again, you can look up Japanese technology and you'll get all kinds of information. I especially encourage you to look up things like the high-speed train system because it's pretty impressive. All right, so I've given you a basic presentation about Japan. Here's an interesting fact. Japan has, or will have, hosted the Olympics 3 times once they host this next one. Back in the 1930s, I believe, they hosted the Olympics. Again, in 1998, they hosted the Winter Olympics in Nagasaki. And then they were supposed to host the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, which have been postponed to 2021. But in the next year, and as they build up to the Olympics, you're going to see a lot about Japan and Tokyo. So I want you to remember some of the things you learned today, and you can look up the 2020 Japan Olympics or Tokyo Olympics, and you'll see some really cool stuff. All right, it's been fun. I'm almost hitting my 15-minute limit, so YouTube's going to kick me off. You guys have a great time looking up more information about Japan. Don't forget to fill in your passport, and we will see you soon.